Preview. Klimaatverandering heeft ook een impact op de voedselzekerheid en de voedselsoevereiniteit van verschillende gemeenschappen. In Suriname is cassave hoog voedsel voor de inheemse Amarons. Maar vanwege de gevolgen van klimaatverandering wordt er steeds minder cassave geoogst. Dit heeft natuurlijk impact op de cultuur en de tradities van deze volkeren. Ik heb een gesprek gehad met Regis Chapman, de United Nations World Food Program Country Director voor de Caribbean. En hij gaat in over de wijze waarop de Verenigde Naties omgaat met deze zaak. Director, could you tell us a bit about what the organization does in Suriname?
Sure. So the World Food Program's Office for the Caribbean covers 22 countries and territories throughout the English and Dutch-speaking Caribbean, so including Suriname. We're working with governments throughout the region to help strengthen social protection, disaster management, and food systems with the aim of helping to improve government service to the population, particularly the most vulnerable populations. So we've been engaging with the government of Suriname over the last year or so to really look at how the support of WFP throughout the Caribbean can be amplified in the context of Suriname. We've been engaging on some South-South cooperation. So there was recently a large Latin American Caribbean event on social protection and school feeding in Brazil that we brought colleagues from the government of Suriname to attend. And we're now engaging closely to look at how we can support school feeding programs in the country to again help support the most vulnerable populations of Suriname.
Yeah. So the most vulnerable populations. One issue we have currently in Suriname is regarding the indigenous and the Maroon communities, which live in the rainforest, the pristine rainforest. And an issue we're seeing is that climate change is really affecting not just their food security, but food sovereignty, because these communities are very dependent on cassava, which is like their main food source. And since last year, there has been drought. The ground is becoming infertile, and they haven't been able to get any cassava. So now they're actually having to be dependent on rice sent from Paramaribo to them. But of course, they have food, as in it's food security if rice is being sent. But the concept of food sovereignty, the concept of rice, not being their traditional food source. What's your take on this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so I think there's a couple of challenges. The first of time in which the World Food Program began working with the government of Suriname was actually after some serious flooding a couple of years ago. And so working with the disaster management system of the country, we began to get an understanding of the challenges that, the country is experiencing as a result of climate change and how that impacts people. And so we saw that with the flooding a couple of years back, where many of these same communities were isolated and cut off. WFP supported the NCCR with providing some technical assistance on logistics and some boats to be able to service those isolated communities. But as you said, we're now looking at drought. And so food security and food sovereignty are really important issues. I think what is also important to consider is how food systems, not only in Suriname, but throughout the Caribbean work. And so we're working with the CARICOM Secretariat on their 25 by 25 strategy, which is about reducing the food import bill in CARICOM countries by 25% by the year 2025. Very ambitious target, but what that encompasses is a lot of efforts to make food systems more resilient, but also an understanding that we need to look at it through a whole of society, a whole of CARICOM approach rather than each individual country. So, Suriname trading with neighboring countries and making sure that, the crops that are most relevant for people in different communities are able to be provided. And so as I look at Suriname and some of the challenges that you mentioned, I think it's important that Suriname knows it's not just Suriname on its own.